When Blazing Saddles hit theaters in February 1974, audiences didn't know whether to laugh or walk out. Half a century later, it remains one of the most daring, offensive, and brilliantly crafted comedies ever made. But beneath the fart jokes, Yiddish-speaking Native Americans, and fourth wall-smashing finale lies a story far messier and more fascinating than what ended up on screen. There are deleted scenes too explosive even for Mel Brooks, casting disasters that almost derailed everything, and one accidental blooper so strange it was left in the final cut on purpose. This is the real story behind Blazing Saddles. To truly understand Blazing Saddles, you have to understand the America it was born into. In 1974, the Vietnam War had ended in national shame. Watergate had exploded across every newspaper in the country. Nixon was on the verge of resignation. Trust in government had collapsed, and the civil rights movement, while having won important legal victories, was still fighting against racism deeply embedded in everyday American life, including in Hollywood. Western films at the time still portrayed white men as stoic heroes and everyone else as background noise. Mel Brooks didn't simply want to spoof that tradition. He wanted to detonate it entirely. The plot of Blazing Saddles is deceptively simple. A corrupt land developer, desperate to clear settlers from a town called Rock Ridge, convinces the governor to appoint a black sheriff, betting that the townspeople will panic and flee in protest. But Sheriff Bart, played by Cleon Little, turns out to be sharper, wittier, and more capable than anyone anticipated. What begins as a racist scheme transforms into a vulnerable-breaking rebellion, with Bart leading the charge against both the villains and the small-minded community that tried to destroy him. On the surface it looks like slapstick comedy. Underneath the sound effects and visual gags, though, is a genuinely dangerous idea, that racism, when dragged into the light and subjected to ridicule, crumbles. That was what made the film so powerful and so controversial. Audiences weren't used to hearing racial slurs in a comedy, even when those slurs were being used to mock bigotry itself. They weren't used to toilet humor in mainstream cinema. And they certainly weren't used to a black hero calmly outsmarting every white man in town. One of Brooks' key collaborators on the script was Richard Pryor, the most fearless black comedian of the era. Pryor helped shape Bart into a character who wasn't just cool and clever, but fully self-aware of the absurdity surrounding him. Pryor had originally been considered to play the role himself, but Warner Brothers refused to insure him due to his history with substance use. That decision likely changed the entire tone of the film. What Pryor contributed to the script, however, remained jokes that cut deep, satire that didn't flinch, and a vision of comedy that used laughter as a weapon. The film's ending alone is a statement of intent. Rather than closing out in its fictional Old West setting, Blazing Saddles breaks through the literal walls of the Warner Brothers studio, spilling across sound stages, crashing a musical number, and eventually landing in a theater, showing the very same movie. Characters become aware they are inside a film. The satire consumes itself. It was one of the earliest self-aware endings in American comedy, a template that would later inspire everything from Ferris Bueller's Day Off to Deadpool. The most shocking moment in Blazing Saddles isn't in the film at all. It's a deleted scene so charged and so daring that even Mel Brooks, the man who put flatulence on the big screen for the first time in Hollywood history, decided he couldn't go through with it. In the final cut, there's a brief flirtatious bedroom exchange between the glamorous Lily Von Stupp, played by Madeline Kahn, and Sheriff Bart. It's suggestive, but restrained. What was originally filmed went considerably further. In the deleted version, Lily and Bart are together in her dressing room after a candlelit meal. The lights go out, the screen fades to black, and Lily's voice cuts through the darkness in her heavy German accent. "Oh, is it true what they say about you people? How well you are built." A pause. The audience hangs in suspense. Then comes Bart's deadpan reply, "I hate to disillusion you, but you're sucking on my arm." In a single beat, the film would have tackled racial stereotypes about black male anatomy, flipped the premise into pure comedy, and undercut the tension with perfectly timed absurdity. It was arguably more explosive than anything else in the movie, and it never made the cut. Brooks discussed the decision in interviews, including one with Conan O'Brien, explaining that the scene crossed the line from satire into something he feared would overshadow the rest of the film. Walking the tightrope between humor and commentary, he decided the risk wasn't worth taking. As he later admitted in one conversation, "Maybe I got scared." There were other moments cut, as well. Several early drafts featured a more explicit version of Lily's seduction of Bart, in which she not only invokes the stereotype, but physically tries to verify it for herself. Bart's reaction, as written, was cool, unimpressed, and dismissive, the comedy rooted entirely in his refusal to be rattled. Even that version didn't survive to production. Brooks has since said he may have overcorrected, that he wanted the film to push the envelope and then stop just short of going all the way. What these deleted scenes reveal is important. This wasn't shock for shock's sake. These moments were part of a larger, deliberate effort to tear down the polite facade of Hollywood storytelling, to expose racism not just as a moral failing, but as a ridiculous, fragile system held together by fear and ignorance. Few moments in cinema history are as unexpected as the campfire scene in Blazing Saddles, where a group of cowboys sit around an open fire eating beans and audibly passing gas. In 1974, no major film had ever included a flatulence gag with full sound effects. Brooks didn't just allow it. He went back during post-production and added more fart sounds after test audiences laughed so hard they couldn't hear the end of the joke. This wasn't simply toilet humor for its own sake. For decades, Hollywood westerns had built the cowboy into a mythic figure, strong, silent, heroic, perpetually clean. Brooks wanted to shatter that image entirely. He wanted cowboys seen as real men, sweaty, gassy, sleeping in the dirt. The scene destroyed a carefully constructed illusion that Hollywood had spent years polishing, and audiences responded by laughing until they cried. Warner Brothers executives, meanwhile, called it vulgar, lowbrow, and pointless. Brooks ignored them completely. That same philosophy of deliberate chaos extended to the film's climactic battle sequence, which spills out of the fictional town of Rock Ridge and directly onto the Warner Brothers lot itself. Characters crash through a musical number, fight across a Hollywood street, and end up in front of a real theater. The whole sequence is intended to feel like it's falling apart at the seams, and within that chaos, something happened that nobody planned at all. As the cast runs out of the studio gate and onto the street, a man in a casual sweater walks calmly through the middle of the shot. He isn't an extra. He isn't in costume. He wasn't hired. He was simply a random pedestrian who happened to wander onto a live set while the cameras were rolling. Rather than cut the shot or attempt to remove him, Brooks told the crew to leave him in. His presence, confused, casual, utterly oblivious, added one more absurd layer to a scene already packed with them. He became, accidentally, a small piece of cinematic history. These kinds of moments were not mistakes that slipped past Brooks. They were exactly what he was looking for. He encouraged his cast to improvise constantly. Gene Wilder, who played the Waco Kid, regularly adjusted his lines in the moment, delivering them with such effortless calm that the character felt genuinely lived in. Madeline Kahn improvised several of her most memorable moments, including her breathy, off-key performance of I'm Tired. Clean Little's quiet sarcasm and dry facial reactions gave Bart an intelligence that went beyond what was written on the page. Then there's the Yiddish-speaking Native American scene, perhaps the film's most surreal moment. In a flashback to Bart's childhood, he and his family are surrounded by warriors on horseback. It looks like the setup for a massacre, until the tribal chief, played by Brooks himself, begins to speak. Not in Apache, not in Sioux, in fluent Yiddish. The other warriors nod solemnly along. One shouts Shabbos. It's jarring, absurd, and genuinely funny. But it also makes a serious point. Hollywood westerns had spent decades portraying indigenous people as nameless, threatening outsiders. By giving them Yiddish, Brooks exposed just how hollow and lazy those portrayals had always been. When Warner Brothers executives sat through the final cut of Blazing Saddles, the screening room was reportedly dead silent. No laughter, no applause. One executive called it too vulgar for American audiences. Another called it career-ending. Ted Ashley, the head of the studio at the time, wanted the film released quietly in a handful of cities, and then pulled before it could cause damage. But Mel Brooks had something most directors don't: final cut authority written directly into his contract. The studio could not legally alter, censor, or bury the film without his explicit permission. They were stuck with what he had made. The road to that point had been rocky from the start. Richard Pryor had been the first choice to play Bart, but Warner Brothers refused to insure him following his narcotics arrest. The role went to Clean Little, a Broadway-trained actor with no major film credits. Little was a revelation, measured, ironic, and quietly brilliant, but his casting was born entirely from the studio's refusal to take a risk. The role of the Waco Kid was originally given to Gig Young, an Oscar-winning actor who seemed perfect on paper. On his very first day of filming, the scene where the Waco Kid wakes up hanging in a jail cell, Young collapsed on set due to alcohol withdrawal. Production ground to a halt. Brooks fired him on the spot and called Gene Wilder, with whom he had worked on The Producers. Wilder flew out the next day and began filming almost immediately. His performance became one of the most beloved elements of the entire film. Even John Wayne turned down a cameo, telling Brooks the movie was too blue for his image, Hollywood shorthand for too crude. Wayne reportedly added that while he couldn't appear in it, he'd be first in line to buy a ticket. That reaction, from one of the most iconic figures in Western cinema, only underscored how genuinely subversive Blazing Saddles was perceived to be. When the film finally opened in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, it exploded. Theaters extended their runs indefinitely. Warner Brothers, having done everything possible to limit the film's exposure, scrambled to expand distribution as quickly as they could. By the end of its theatrical run, Blazing Saddles had earned over $100 million, making it the biggest comedy hit of the year. Blazing Saddles was not a film that happened accidentally. Every fart joke, every improvised line, every accidental walk-on, every cutscene and casting crisis was part of something larger, a deliberate, fearless effort to use comedy as a tool for exposing what American culture was too polite to say out loud. Mel Brooks understood that laughter could go where serious drama couldn't. He built a film around that idea and then fought an entire studio to keep it intact. 50 years on, the chaos still works. The jokes still land. And the questions the film raises about race, power, and who gets to be the hero haven't gone anywhere. That's what separates Blazing Saddles from the comedies that came before it and most that have followed. It wasn't just funny. It was brave enough to matter.